great sight. An excellent example of human curiosity in action. I had been slow coming up the path that led to the Abbey on Iona a few years ago when I visited. My classmates had dispersed. We were there for a class on pilgrimage and pastoral care. And we're on our own for a little bit after our morning devotional time at the ruins of the nunnery on the island. I had traveled by stages up the hill, little echo of Abraham and the ancient Israelites in my mind, stopping and sitting to rest on every open bench, taking a few moments to watch the world go by as I did. I had injured my knee a month or so earlier, and it was still not cooperating, and so I did need to stop quite frequently. When I finally got up to the Abbey, I sat in the cool, dark stone nave for a bit, the nave being that long part of the church in front of the chancel area where the congregation sits. Now, Iona is a place of high expectations. It has served as a beacon for so many, known as holy ground, and has carried the expectation of an interaction with God by pilgrims throughout its history, a history that is some 1,400 years in length. When folks go there intentionally, they have the expectation of some form of life-changing experience. It's built into the equation, built into the journey. I have to tell you, though, that's not why I went. I hadn't come for the reason of having some sort of transformational life experience. While the scenery was pretty, the ancient mystique of the place was entirely lost on me in the moment. I don't know if it was because I was tired or my knee hurt or what, but it was lost on me. As time to regather with my classmates drew near, I left the nave and walked into the enclosed courtyard of the Abbey. It was square in form, and as I went down one side and turned the corner to go down another, I could see my classmates and the professor for the course I was taking standing at the far distant corner. But that's when my eye caught a sign just out of the corner of it, a sign that read, "Story Share." As I said, time was ticking away. And well, I felt conflicted. I've never been one who doesn't want to honor the time of others. And yet the draw toward that room, toward that sign, was strong. My curiosity had been piqued. But there were my classmates. I went into the room. Instead of finding what I had expected, though, to my disappointment at the time, what I learned was that the story share was not about hearing a story, but instead about pilgrims, which technically included me, sharing what had brought them to Iona. You should know, I was in no mood for sharing. My knee was hurting. I didn't have anything of great worth to share, in my opinion. I hadn't wanted to go to Iona in the first place. My wife had gone a few years earlier, found the trip amazing, and instead said that I should go. I needed one more class for my doctoral coursework, and the other students who were going were ones I had connected more with within my cohort of study, so I chose to go. I know I sounded sour as I shared that information with the story collector. I felt sorry for the lady who was collecting those stories. And about just that moment, one of my classmates walked by the door. I called out to him to come into the room. He, at least in my opinion, would be much more affable than I was being. And so he did. He came into the room, and they interacted with one another in an amazing way. And over the next 45 minutes or so, after we left the room with the lady and joined our group, I learned something. You see, my head turning, that thing that caught my eye, the story share, the way God got my attention, wasn't about me getting something that I had hoped for on my terms. However, the next 45 minutes were amazing. The story collector, as I said, joined the group. She had a long history with the Abbey, and you might have been exposed to some of her prayers over time. As we went about, she shared some of the stories about the architecture, which the gentleman I had invited into the room connected with, for he knew the architect who had done some of the refurbishment work of the Abbey. I told you he's way more interesting than me. And she in turn shared a wondrous story about a hawk being caught in that nave I spoke of before. The whole interaction transformed my mood and my ability to recognize the holy in the moment. The Abbey was, and the nave and all of the mystique of Iona was no longer lost on me. I experienced a sense of God's presence and handiwork at play in turning my head so that another might benefit, my colleague. Moses' head turning wasn't about him having an amazing experience either. God had given Moses a heart to take a stand against injustice. That heart got him in trouble in Egypt, where he saw one of the Egyptians beating one of the Hebrew slaves, and he intervened and took the life of the Egyptian. It's why he had to flee to Midian. That heart also was present when he engaged the two Hebrews were fighting, where the one had hit the other, and he asked, basically, isn't life rough enough without y'all beating on each other? And they replied with a kind of who died and made you boss attitude. And it was that same heart, once he had fled Egypt into Midian. In case you're curious, Midian is located in the Middle East, kind of like we are in relation to the peninsula in New Jersey and Pennsylvania and Maryland. If you look at the map, water comes up, and there's a point where Israel, Jordan, and modern-day Saudi Arabia come together. Midian would have ran the strip just south of there. So when he came to Midian on the run, Moses, he came across some women trying to water their sheep, but being bullied by other shepherds. He shooed the other shepherds away and watered the sheep of the women, who then went home and told their father about this Egyptian, because he still looked like one, who had helped them out. And their father invited Moses into their house, and Moses ended up marrying one of the daughters and having a child whom he named a name that references being a stranger in a foreign land. Yes, God had given Moses a heart for injustice. And this is where we find him today in the wilderness, tending sheep. A married man with, everything that worldly term says one needs. A purpose as a family man and a shepherd and sheep of goats, a way to feed the family. And he is out in this wilderness place, unowned grazing land, it said, when God turns his head. At a place called Horeb, aka Mount Sinai, the mountain of God, whose actual location isn't really known for certain today, but is possibly referenced even 1,400 years ago in Egyptian script. God gets Moses' attention through fire around a thorn bush, a fire that does not consume the thorn bush. It's a metaphor, by the way, that the people of Israel identify with, the Jewish folks identify with, as this is the bush being the people of Israel and the fire of protection around it, it being God. In that experience, Moses finds that his true mission in life, his true purpose in life, is more than being who he is in that moment. Instead, it's being part of God's saving work in the lives of ancient Israel. Moses is commissioned in this head-turning moment. Moses, whose curiosity drew him to this strange thing that got his attention, is satiated in his curiosity. But the moment is really about God taking action to respond to the suffering of his children. In other words, Moses thought he was going to go and learn something new, but it turned out to be something entirely different. I must turn aside and look at this great sight. Have you ever had one of those head-turning moments in your life? We can become really wrapped up, human beings, in our day-to-day, and unintentionally end up with blinders that keep us focused on only what we have, and on preserving what we have and taking that next step. And we can miss what's going on in the world around us. Today's story encourages us to increase our peripheral vision. I remember doing this exercise as a kid and now at the eye doctor, right? To figure out where you can see your fingers as you go. For us, the story says, hey, we need to pay attention to what's happening around us and to be ready to look and turn aside from where our regular view might be. As I drove into the parking lot this morning at church, I was here kind of early, like I usually am on Sunday mornings. The parking lot is usually empty, but today there was another car in the lot, parked off to the side. It didn't have tags on it, and so obviously that sort of piqued my curiosity. I had a choice as I got out of the car how I would handle it if there was someone in that other vehicle. We all have a choice, right? I had the choice to say, I must turn aside and look at this, or, I'm just going to leave well enough alone and go in the door, not worry. But something said, turn and look. And as I got out of the car, got my collar together, got my breakfast, the communion materials for the 8 o'clock in hand, shut the door, locked the car. That car started up and the back out lights turned on. But it didn't pull out really. As I walked a little bit further toward the building, I turned and noticed and I looked and I just sort of waved to the person in the car and I said, hey, are you okay? And the person rolled down the window. I asked again, are you okay? And they said, yeah. I was just taking some time to pray. So I said, well, you don't have to go away. And as I came in the building, the person pulled back into the space. I must turn aside and look at this. God knows we are a curious being. God created us this way. If we are to experience that part we have in the mission, God's mission of love in the world, we would do well to nurture that curiosity, to fight against the world's message that says, mind your own business. Moses could have kept walking, could have said, okay, that's something I just don't want to mess with, and drove his sheep in another direction. To experience the fullness of who we are meant to be in Christ, we have to be open and curious to that which is happening around us. As I said, the world says mind your own business, but God says mind my business. And so today, family of God, may God get your attention in a way that piques your curiosity. May you say to that, I must turn aside and look at this. And in the turning, may you find and embrace the mission God has for you, not for yourself, but to touch the lives of others. May it be so. Amen.